Hey, so today I want to talk about what it's like sleeping at minus 40 degrees Celsius or even up to minus 50, minus 60 degrees Celsius when you're preparing in an environment that's 40 plus Celsius and high humidity. So going from sort of plus 40 in the Australian summer to minus 40, minus 50 in the Alaskan winter in the subarctic regions that I'm going to be competing in next March, or I have competed in previously. So when it comes to being able to get as much sleep as I can, or adequate sleep to allow me to perform in these events, I need to make sure that I'm adapting within that environment, or I'm acclimatizing and adapting to that environment. So going from that sort of plus 40 to minus 40, or that 80-degree differential, kind of leaves me exposed or at risk to a number of sort of cold weather illnesses and sicknesses and frostbite and these sort of things. So I need to make sure that I'm adapting within that environment so I can perform, and the adaptations I get are the ones I need. So when I leave Australia, I'll sort of go across a little bit early. So when I get there, I can go out early in the morning when the temperatures are at their lowest, and bearing in mind the southern areas that I start in are going to be nowhere near as cold as the northern areas that I'm going to sort of reach into or extend into as I go further north. But I'll go out early in the morning and expose myself to as much of the cold weather that I can tolerate. So I'll go, and as I've spoken about, I'll kind of reach that maximum amount I can tolerate. And that's kind of my physical resilience to cold. And then I'll put on some layers and I'll warm myself up so that I'm not at risk of actually creating issues before I start. And then I'll kind of do these intermittent exposures and then go back and warm up. And then that space that I allow from exposure to exposure, remember when I spoke about recovery, allows me to get the recovery that I need. And then from day to day, I'll get small increases in my adaptation or acclimatization to the cold, so that when the race starts and I'm kind of immersed in this cold environment, I've got as many or the minimum amount of adaptation that I need to go forth and make sure that I'm not putting myself at risk. So when it comes time to sleep, based off my previous races where I go out, I'll kind of walk till about midnight or just beyond midnight. I'll find an area that's sort of flat, that there's enough space on the side of the trail that I can sleep and it doesn't look too bad. I'll flatten down the snow. I'll lay out a basic ground mat to stop some of the heat, stop some of my heat from going down into the snow or the cold coming up and making me shiver. Lay down my sleeping bag, which is inside a bivy bag. Then I'll put everything that I need for the next day in there. I'll climb in there and I'll do my best to get as much sleep as I can, sort of anywhere between 4 to 6 hours, depending on how long I've gone, how I feel, what I want to do the next day, okay, a number of these other factors. So when I first started doing it, it kind of all went really poorly. So I didn't get much sleep. I had issues trying to make sure that there wasn't too much cold coming in, but enough fresh air to come in. And it kind of was a really, really uncomfortable situation. I just didn't enjoy it. And then as I've gone on, I've slowly refined the process. So I'll go in, and as I've sort of spoken about, I'll expose myself to this discomfort. I'll work out what went well, what didn't go well. I adapt, or I have a space on the other side of that where I can think about it a little bit, and then I can adapt my routine the next night. And the same thing, that my ability or my physical tolerance to this temperature, or my ability to thermoregulate within this environment, adapts as well. So I get both the mental decision making and that physiological adaptation that I need for the cold. And then when I go from one race and I come back to the next one, so from my previous race in the Yukon, I adapted both mentally, I adapted biologically or physiologically, and I adapted my kit so that I've got internal adaptations, I've got external adaptations, and I've got access or change some of the resources that I've got access to. So now when I go forward next year, I've got a much better sleeping bag, I'll have a better ground mat, I'll have a better routine, and I'll make sure that I've adapted as much as I can. And as I go and I get further north, I'm still going to have to adapt as I go. So that's kind of adaptation. So that's what I want to talk about today. So I've spoken about the processes involved in resilience before, and now we're up to the fourth process, which is adaptation. So when we think about adaptations in terms of sort of scientific explanations or how it works scientifically, a good explanation is Hansdale's model of general adaptation, which shows that when we're exposed to a stimulus or a threat or a challenge or whatever it may be, we have a general reduction in our performance or our ability or our level or state of readiness. And then that improves over time. And then we have a period of supercompensation where we actually improve above our pre-stimulus baseline level. and then we return back to normal. And the idea is that we keep exposing ourselves to the stimulus or threats or challenge or whatever it is. And this is kind of a physical training model as well, or a medical model as well. And then we continue to improve or have positive adaptations. If we expose ourselves when we're in a depleted state, then we can have maladaptations over time. So we need to understand that, yes, we need to expose ourselves to challenge or threat or periods of adversity. Then on the other side, we need recovery, as I've already spoken about, and then we have the adaptation. And that period of adaptation is where we make the necessary changes, both at a biological individual level, or maybe it's a change through our external environment or some of the resources. We make those changes, or those changes happen, so that next time we're exposed to that same stimulus or situation or challenge or whatever it may be, we've improved our capacity to tolerate it, we've improved the resources that we have, we've improved our mental skills, we've improved in a way that we're able to better confront, we have an increased capacity, and we can move through it with less friction. So if we think about this in physical terms, kind of if you get up and go for a run, you expose yourself to a stress, there's then a period of recovery, you adapt, you go for another run, and over time you improve your aerobic capacity. And it's the same with our capacity for stress. We can improve our stress capacity by exposing ourselves to an appropriate level of stress and then progressively overload it. So if we want to be able to take on big challenges, then we start off small and we work our way up. So I just didn't wake up one day and find myself in the subarctic regions. And this is probably not where I'm going to limit myself either, is that I progressively expose myself to these challenges over a really long extended period, and now here I am. And this isn't just constrained or isolated within our individual pursuits. This happens within cultural organisations, it happens within our workplace, it happens within our family, it happens within our social structures. Okay, if you think about having to work from home now, there has been an adaptation to that. So people have adapted their lifestyles to be able to work from home. They've made necessary changes, and some people may have made positive changes, some people may still be going through this change process where they're adapting to working from home. Their organisations have adapted to people being dispersed. They've adapted to the changes in communication ability. They've adapted to the way they hold their meetings, to their interpersonal interactions. All these things are going with business. We've adapted to it. And even within the environment we're in at the moment, with COVID going around, we've adapted to COVID, and we'll adapt post that and continue moving forwards. So once we understand how adaptation works, we can start to understand whether we're adapting in a positive direction or adapting in a negative direction or having maladaptation. So that's kind of a brief overview of adaptation, but it's important to understand for adaptation to take place, it's necessary that we expose ourselves to a relevant stimulus or a stress or challenge that we need that's going to provide that positive adaptation. And if we're exposed to one that we weren't expecting, then we need to try and make sure that we're getting the adaptations that are going to allow us to improve again in a similar situation, and or something that's going to transfer to things that are similar, so that next time we're put in these situations or we are confronted with a similar situation, we're better able to handle it, and we're better able to handle it, we have better skills to move through it, and we have better outcomes on the other side, and we continue to adapt. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit around adaptation and gets you to start thinking about how you're adapting to your current environment, what you need to do, whether there's anything you need to change, whether there's anything you need to think about so that you're getting your individual adaptations, so you increase the capacities that you need, you get the mental skills, you get what you need from it, the resources, whether you need to change any of your resources to adapt to the environment, and anything external within your environment that you may need to change or manipulate a little bit so that you can adapt in the right direction. So again, I hope that helps understand a little bit around adaptation, and I look forward to next time.